All right. Hello, everybody. Tyler James is here with you. I hope everyone is doing all right. I hope you're beating the heat. We got here in New England, at least, and I know my buddies here in New York. We're all dealing with high 90s temperatures, a lot of school closings, a lot of camp closings, and so we're just gonna roll right through it. But I'm excited to bring on my guests. Today, we're going to be talking about licensing comics, Kickstarter, crowdfunding, and just this wild world that we are all in. So I'm excited to dive into it. On the program today, I have James Mascia. James is a writer. He's the publisher of Dren Productions. He's the creator of all things sci-fi, fantasy, nerd, and geek, and a veteran of over 50 Kickstarter campaigns right now, one of the most prolific comic and RPG creators on the platform. What's up, James? How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm awesome. And we're also joined by his frequent partner in crime, a collaborator, Michael Dolce. Mike's been a professional writer, artist, and podcaster for some time now. He's co-created The Descendants for Image Comics. He's written for the Grimm's Fairy Tales from Zenescope, and has continued his creator-owned superhero book, The Sire, on Kickstarter, and he's got a launch with that as well. So we'll talk about that. But what's up, Mike? You're beating the heat over there in New York?
Yeah, as best we can. As best we can. Sheltering indoors.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into it. You guys have collaborated on a cool project, and this is a topic in terms of licensing comics that, despite comics' rich and long history of licensed comics and the fact that licensed comics are some of the biggest projects on Kickstarter of all time, G.I. Joe, Transformers, The Expanse, those are all in the top 10, but often it's not really seemed like licensing comics might be something that the independent or independently minded creator can actually get into. But this is something that you guys have actually jumped into a little bit. So, but James, as someone with a lot of your own sort of intellectual property and worlds that you've built, how did you first get into the idea of licensing and interested in the idea of licensing comics?
Well, it started during COVID. When I was, sitting here in front of the computer during COVID, these ads kept coming up for this thing called the Licensing Expo, which happened to be, because it was COVID, a virtual convention or virtual expo that particular year. So we said, hey, let's try it. It was going to be free. It was going to be nothing. We got meetings with, a whole bunch of different companies. And so we started there. We actually got our first license through that show, a book called Teddy Scares that we've done a few issues for. And then when it went live out in Vegas, we decided, hey, you know what? Let's go and let's see what else we can accomplish.
Difficult decision to have to make a trip to Las Vegas. It was tough.
Yeah, I know.
We had to think hard about that one.
Yeah. Tell the wives, sorry, honey, it's business.
That's what it is. I mean, what are you going to do?
Well, yeah. So talk to me about that. What's that convention like or what was it like to go to? You just walking around and seeing intellectual properties or booths, or how,
First, you want to go, Mike?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like a standard trade show. If you've ever been in the corporate world, it's like a Comic-Con, but it's not a Comic-Con at the same time, because it's booths. You'd walk around, you'd think it was a smaller Comic-Con. You would think you have Sony Pictures, and then you have Amazon and big brand names, Nickelodeon. I have a picture with Gem, there's a person dressed as Gem, and it's so you have a lot of similar things, but it's B2B, and that's the thing that separates it from being a B2C, business to consumer Comic-Con, where it's definitely, you're in the corporate space. So for a lot of creators that may or may not have worked in corporate, America, I lived in, I worked in corporate America. I worked at Wizard Magazine. I worked for an IT company where I really got to dive into, corporate America, doing all the comic book stuff. It was familiar to me, but I could understand a lot of creators, if they went there, it might seem weird to them, but it's awesome. It's very inviting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating world, and definitely, I mean, when I'm hearing you talk about it, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. This would be how you would connect these worlds of, but at the same time, like, as you're walking through these things, what were some of the properties that like would like immediately jump out to you? And then how did you go about deciding, all right, who am I gonna actually talk to and try to connect? And what would sort of, I mean, I'm used to pitching my books at a convention, but what would your pitch or approach be at a show like this?
Yeah. So, well, like as far as brands go that we see there, like the biggest booth that I have to say is there, or I should say the two biggest booths that are there is one, Pokemon
Yeah.
is one of the biggest booths at the expo, and then like Warner Brothers has like the biggest booth, and like they have like things set up for Harry Potter and for Superman and for all the DC comics, and then all of the Looney Tunes and like like everything. And then behind them, as far as like huge presence there, Mattel. Okay, and
Yeah.
they have like Barbie and Hot Wheels and all of that to license that stuff out. And then there are like a lot of smaller companies there as well. Like I said, we got the Teddy Scares thing, um, the Teddy Scares property. We also got the Smokey the Bear property, which is one of the a licensing agent had that with a bunch of other properties there. Trying to think, like like the Boy Scouts of America, or Scouting America now rather,
Yeah.
is one of the booths there trying to license out things. There
The
are a
strategy
lot
is
of
interesting though, right? The strategy is interesting because we started
Yes.
out walking the show floor. This past year we had an actual booth. The booths are a little more expensive than you would get at a Comic-Con, but the idea behind it was, rather than, and first of all, I give 100% credit to James for this. He discovered this, like you said, during COVID. And what it did was give us a direct channel straight to the people you want to talk to, which I think is amazing. It also introduced us to licensing agents. We're going to be making an announcement pretty soon about actually signing on board with a licensing agency, which is pretty exciting. And this is all thanks to him for doing that. But the first time around, what you do is you actually at the expo, you try to book meetings prior to going. So it's not just walking around being like, hey, I have a comic or I have whatever. You book a meeting in advance. They scope you out. You scope them out. And then you actually go, either there's a meeting place or you go right to their booth. This year, though, we invested in the booth itself. And we triple the amount of meetings we made, because now people were booking with us.
More than triple. Than triple.
So when you had the booth, what kind of setup did you do at your booth? And then what were you, like, going into this, obviously, having goals and having things, like, did you have specific goals in mind for, what you wanted to achieve? And because it seems like there's the IP that you guys own and control, and then the and then the addition, the option to acquire IP potentially to make comics with, seems to be like two completely different tracks, but finding ways to make those happen.
Inbound and outbound. That's how we kind of serviced ourselves when we were there. James was in charge of the booth setup, which he does an amazing job with that. Again, unlike a Comic-Con, we brought a sample of almost all of our IPs, but you're not bringing inventory. You're not there to sell. You could give away, but again, we actually just created production packages for the different meetings that we were going to. It had our slide deck in it. It had our press releases for Smokey and for Tales and some other press releases we did. So it was really, it's there to attract for the, for getting our stuff out. That was how we kind of, set up ourselves at the show. For coming in, we have our banners. It's a standard. I mean, it was a standard, almost small press booth, right? I mean, it's basically almost the size of a small press booth, a little smaller, but honestly, not width wise, depth wise was smaller, which to us, what did it matter? I mean, that was, that had, instead of a 10 by 10, you're at a 5 by 10, who cares?
Right. But yeah, you're not trying to, fit a bunch of creators back there for signings,
right,
and stockpiles of books and things. Yeah.
Right. So that made it, super easy. We were able to kind of set up our tables and chairs and get, we could have our one-on-one meetings, and at the same time we could address people that kind of walked by as well too. James, what else was there? Am I missing anything on that?
No, I mean, like essentially, like you said, I mean, like the setup itself was very much like we would do at a Comic-Con, with the banners and everything. The only difference was we didn't bring inventory. We brought a couple of copies of each particular book. That was it.
Yeah. And so who did you find was interested in meeting with you, or trying to get meetings with you, and what were they therefore interested in, pitching, etc.?
Go ahead, James.
There were a couple of people that were interested in meeting with us that wanted, that we were one of the only comic creators there. I think we were the only comic creators that had a booth.
Really, it's not just creators. I mean, we're one of, I think Dark Horse had gone the year before, but they weren't there.
Yeah.
Titan Comics were there the year before. They weren't there. So
people that came up, some of the people that came up to us were people that were actually interested in getting their stuff produced into comics. Like we're talking with a video game company right now, or a computer game company, about doing a comic for one of their games right now. We were talking to a company that had a bunch of VTubers, which are, it's hard to explain. It's, essentially doing a podcast, but you're not on the podcast. It's an avatar instead. But doing a comic for the VTubers character.
Yeah. And again, also a lot of the meetings that we ended up booking prior were with licensing agents. And that's a whole world, to be honest with you, that it makes sense, again, from a corporate sense, but from a creator sense. I think from a creator sense, everyone's kind of attuned to the movie and TV stuff, right? Oh, you get a literary agent for your books, or you get an agent for movie, TV stuff, or you get a management company, right? I think I would say a lot of independent creators probably are familiar with those people, but then there are people literally trying to pitch your stuff for all of that. And that includes toy merchandise and shirts. And, I think it's funny because in the world of Kickstarter, we are our own licensing agents when it comes to merchandise. Yeah. We create our own t-shirts. I mean, James does an amazing job of getting, our stuff on TeePublic, and there's always, we do stickers and books, bookmarks for, tchotchkes for stretch goals and things like that. But there's an entire industry based on that. Now, again, it falls into the same caveat that most, publishers are looking for and distributors are looking for. They want a following. They want to know, like, okay, what's your units that you're selling? How many units are you selling? Do you have retail distribution? Yeah. These are the things that maybe a smaller independent company would not be able to pitch because they don't have those channels. But we happen, again, we've been in Diamond the last 3-4 years. We've built up relationships with retailers now. We have all the channels that an independent licensing agent or another company would want in terms of getting the stuff out there. So we do tell them our model, though, is Kickstarter first. And it's our business model that works. And it's great, though, because it engages. It's all about the language you use with these companies too. I tell them we're here to engage with the super fan, and they understand that term. They know what the super fan is. They know what the people who are into that kind of stuff are looking for. And and we're very, we have a structured business plan, which is another thing that maybe an independent creator might not have. But these are all things you kind of need when you're dealing with them.
Yeah, fascinating world, and yeah, definitely makes sense that you know, when you see whether it's things on backpacks or things on,
Right.
I mean, there's still the lunch boxes and all of that.
I mean, we even worked with one company. We were talking about doing, you know, that it was, you know, it's a not a role playing game. It's a board game or something like that. And you know, they want to turn their board game into a comic book. They want to expand. You know, the phrase. I don't know if the phrase is current anymore, but it used to be called transmedia. Now I think it's something else. But it essentially means like taking your IP. IP is king. IP is absolutely king, and it's you know, transplanting that everywhere you can.
We also had one of the game companies coming from one of our properties too.
Yes.
So
yeah, like, oh, have you ever thought about doing this? Yeah, of course we've thought about doing this. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Nice. And so, okay, so it's cool that people were coming in, checking out your stuff, and just, you know, potential collaborations and partnerships and conversations that you get those going. But you seem to go to this also with the idea that, hey, we're going to try to acquire at least a property for license. So did you, and let's, I guess, talk specifically about the project that's coming up for Smokey Bear. Had you already like identified that one before this latest convention, or was that something you sort of discovered at the convention to go for?
So we got it in, we actually had the discussion at the licensing expo last year, 2024. And actually we had gone over to the licensing agent, not even for Smokey the Bear. He has, or they have a property with Danny Trejo that we were trying to get. And while we were having the conversation, he's like, you know, I also have this other one. I have Smokey the Bear, or Smokey Bear. Sorry, it is Smokey Bear, not Smokey the Bear.
So I'll be honest. I was having sort of like a Mandela effect.
No, it's exactly what it is.
And I asked my wife, I'm like, is it Smokey the Bear or Smokey Bear? And she's like, Smokey the Bear. And I'm like,
no, I know
it's not. It's Smokey
we
Bear.
All say, and I will tell you that as soon as we had said it during the initial meeting, we got corrected instantly. But he said he had the property Smokey Bear, and you know, would we be interested in that? And we're like, sure, let's take a look at it. And you know, then we started the conversation from May of last year, talking with them for a couple of months, and we finally signed the licensing agreement last August. Okay. So August of 2024.
You also got to realize too, with these again, it's you're in corporate America at this point, which I think is. I think a lot of people, you know, they get a bad rap from the, you know, creators. Oh, I don't want to ever go corporate or whatever. But they're very much in amazement at the stuff that we can do because it's not something they can do. Yeah. They're very much, you know, whereas you go to a Comic-Con and, you know, we are so glued into the comic book industry. You know, I can tell you what happened in Uncanny X-Men 236 when the Reavers attacked them in Australia and yada, yada, yada. This is to them, it's wow, it's you can draw, or wow, you know, you can create worlds. You know, I mean, we had one you know, executive assistant kind of ask us like, how do you come up with all this stuff? You know, and so it's kind of they're actually very much in awe of the creative process because that's not what they do. But on the flip side, which makes our job so much easier, they know that's not what they do. They're not trying to do what we do. They're trying to partner up. So the intentions, you know, whereas I think when you're trying to pitch a publisher, right? Yeah. I think, you know, they get a million pitches. There's tons of people pitching them. There's tons of people, you know, with the same vampire idea or the same zombie idea or whatever the case is. And so I feel like it can be a more daunting task for an independent creator to pitch a publisher just because you're in this world that everyone else does what you do. This licensing world, honestly, we were a big fish in a small pond, even though we're not a big fish necessarily in our, you know, pond. So it's actually kind of cool, you know, dealing with, you know, corporate types is actually pretty easy and fun when you know that they're going to leave you alone and do what you do best.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm sort of having an epiphany with something else that we've got a deal that's in the works, and so I have entertainment lawyer
Mhm.
and a manager, and like the fact that I can just stand back and let them do what they do, and like on the one hand, it's kind of scary because it's like a lot of us come from a DIY ethos. We've got to have our hands on the wheel.
Right.
But I'm also like, man, if you're able to negotiate this thing,
Right.
and
Mhm.
and you're very much earning your 10% or
Correct.
5% or whatever
Yep.
by just doing the legalese
Mhm.
and pushing back, where as creators we might just take the first thing that was offered. So yeah,
Yep.
it is fascinating. So let's so you connect with a licensing agent. He's got Smokey Bear, and then there's some conversation, like, and then eventually you sign something. But what are some of the conversations? What are some of the deal points or the things that you guys needed to clarify before you could say, okay, let's do something with this? What were some of those things like, James?
I guess the biggest thing is the advance, because most of these they
Yeah.
want the advance, an advance against royalties.
Mhm.
And some of them, like, I mean, we've talked to some people that, like, or some properties, I should say, that they want 50 grand.
Right.
And that's just, I mean,
Yeah.
not attainable for somebody like us.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah,
Not
and,
yet.
and,
What
and
was
it's
that?
one of the and it's one of those things where you could say, okay, well, if Skybound spent 50 grand to acquire the Transformers license
Yeah.
and then
Right.
turned around and launched the biggest Kickstarter in history, like, they're looking pretty smart.
Right.
And I'm imagining IDW is kicking themselves for ever letting it go,
Right.
or not doing that. On
No,
the
but that's
flip side,
exactly it though.
And
It's you have to,
I
it's your
100%
ROI. What's
agree.
your return on investment?
yeah,
And Mike and I have been talking about this, like we want to go for one of these big, like, like 50 grand ones, but the problem is fronting 50 grand.
yeah,
So we got to
I
figure
mean,
out
it's
to do
again,
that.
it's a risk. It's a risk reward thing. It's not
Oh yeah.
necessarily um the money itself. You just got to sit there and say, okay, we could take a loan out, take a business loan out, or I have a line of credit I could use. Again, all adult sounding things, which,
yeah,
I think sometimes might be scary for, folks who are literally just used to putting their pencil on paper and, or clicking on a typewriter, not a typewriter, you know what I mean? Keyboard. But it's something you think about. And then it always comes to the point where I think you've done a great job of kind of addressing this with ComixLaunch over the years. And it's stuff that you and I have talked about, I think, when I've been on separately. You have to start thinking of yourself as soon as you become an independent artist that is going to make money. You have to start thinking of yourself as a businessman or woman. You're an entrepreneur, and that's what you are. You might not want to be. And I fought it for a long time, early on, because I was always, hey man, the work is going to speak for itself. And I'll let someone else take care of it. And I don't want to sell out and this and that. But no. Once you start really investing in yourself, you have to discuss, okay, what's my ROI on this? All right, if we're going to spend 25 grand on an advance, let's say,
yeah,
what do we need to make this back? How soon do we have to make this back? If I open up a line of credit, what are the interest payments like? And then how soon do I have to pay that off? Am I going to, are we, and we've done this. We've actually done this with some properties where it's a smaller advance, but then you sit there and say, okay, in order to make back X, we've got to do 3 Kickstarters. They've got to each top, X amount of dollars. We've got to put up X amount of dollars in advance to get the artwork done and get all this other stuff done. So you start making out your business plan. You start doing all this stuff. These are all things, again, that, you don't necessarily expect to do as an independent creator. But in our case, we're now an independent publisher, and these are things that now I think they've organically kind of, taken hold to the point where, we got a couple wins under our belt with Teddy Scares. We also licensed a comic book called Death and Maiden from a Disney artist. And her first issue did very well for us on Kickstarter. We have another one coming out soon with that too, where, you start figuring out, okay, all right, well, this made X and this made Y and this didn't do well and this did do well. And, you know, you can start creating a structure in place so that we say, okay, maybe not next year, but maybe the year after that, we can get, you know, famous movie property
Right.
that everyone knows about, or famous wrestler that everyone knows about, and do something with it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is all very helpful things. So obviously one of the first things is like, all right, what's the advance? And is there a way that we can make that happen? I'm also curious, like, you secure the advance, but what does that actually entail you to do? And how much scope, how much reign, and how much negotiation is there about, okay, we're going to pay you this advance, presumably to do something comic related with this. Does the advance like, what does the advance cover? What does, and I'm sure all of this is negotiated, but
Yeah, it's all negotiated. It's just royalties. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just an advance against the royalties. James can go into detail about, I mean, we've definitely, we also have another property that we license called AXA. And each contract is specific to what we can or can't do. But then there's some cases where, James, you would ask them, hey, for the Kickstarter, we want to be able to do bookmarks. Bookmarks aren't covered. Bookmarks might be like we were talking about before. It might be a merchandise item that they have with another company. Can we do this as part of the Kickstarter? Enamel pins, that we were doing. Oh yeah, we can do that. So it's flexible. I don't know, James, if you have any other, examples of that where we've had to kind of
No, it's
navigate
just
that.
I can tell you that, like, for Smokey, it's just the comic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where we are not going to be able to do any of that other extra
Right.
stuff with it. So, like, it's just the comic.
It's a challenge too, because I mean,
Yeah.
part of Kickstarter is offering stuff you can't get
Those
elsewhere.
extra little extras, which we're
We have
not
to
going to
figure
be
that
able
out.
to do on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you'd have to be creative about what would constitute the comic itself, and potential, so like I can see playing with some variant covers and things.
Variant covers,
we
some
have that,
digital
yep.
stuff too. I
Yeah.
think that's a nebulous area. I mean, if we
Mm.
were to do digital wallpapers, I think we could get away with that, because it's not a physical product that they're trying to license out there. Maybe, and if it's approved artwork, then again, I think we can get away with something like that. But yeah, it's trickier, and especially with Smokey, because he's such a well-known property that, it's. I mean, how difficult is it to, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen for that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then also for this particular license, is it covering this specific work, or is it a specific series, or a specific time frame?
I'll give James a lot of credit, and James, I'll let you talk about the story because you came up with it. The Junior Ranger concept, though, and that's original from us. And so, James, why don't you tell him about like what your concept was for this?
It was essentially, I was thinking of a kids TV show, and this would be an episode of the kids TV show where you have your character Smokey. He's and there's a group of kids that would come back every episode, and each episode Smokey's going to teach them a different lesson. Along with the help of another character that we created called the Elder Tree, which is this ancient tree in the middle of the forest, which you will get to meet in this particular issue.
Yeah.
As far as the scope of it, we can do as many issues as we want, as long as it's within the time frame, which I believe for this one was 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. And then we always have the option to renew if we want to, and that would come with, I'm assuming, another advance and another, negotiation of royalties and everything like that. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But we have, I believe it's a 3-year contract where we can publish as many as we want.
Yeah.
Based on how long it's taken us for the first issue, though, we might only get 3 issues out in that amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, the approval process for this, again, because it's a known property, has taken longer than what it was for, Teddy Scares or
Everything
Death
else.
Maiden, where, we're in direct communication with artists that just want us to handle the publishing, get it done, and get it out there. But we're also, I mean, the aspect to this too, again, to what James says, is we can do whatever we want with it, which is great. Depending
within their bounds.
within their boundaries, right? Depending on what we do, or who we work with also, we make a stipulation too in our contracts that, if we create something, we need to be able to be compensated for it at some point. Now, Smokey, again, very restrictive. That being said, there's sometimes judgment calls you have to make in terms of, are we trying to create the best story possible? And if we're not going to get the proper, monetary, reward for it, let's do it anyway, because, at the end of the day, we're here to service the book, and if the book makes money, then we make money. So it's a win-win in that regard. And something like Smokey Bear. See, I can't even not do it. It's going to help grow the kids line, which is what we're trying to do. And it's opening doors with other things that we're also trying to get done for other future projects of our own. So, each license is specific, each contract is specific. I think we've both gotten very good at reading contracts now. I do have a business lawyer that I use. I have my creative studio that does websites and stuff, so I have a business lawyer for that, and I'm able to use that, advantage. But it's a cool world. Getting, stepping forward from being a creator to being a publisher is a cool transition if you like all that stuff, which I happen to.
Yeah, and so. In terms of getting approval and review process, like, were you having to submit scripts and get approved, get artists approved, and get every page approved? Like, how complex was that?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was an arduous process going through it, and it's definitely taken us longer doing this particular property than any others. Like, they had very, very specific things,
Yeah.
if you couldn't read Smokey on his hat, that was no good. Even if Smokey is only this big on the page, they wanted to be able to see Smokey on the hat and on his belt buckle.
Yeah.
There was one page that they turned back to us because the artist drew Smokey putting his paw on one of the kid's shoulders, one of those things you would do, when you're talking to a young kid.
Mhm.
No, Smokey can't touch anybody.
Yeah.
So so we had to have that.
I mean, which makes sense, but it's not something you would think about,
Yeah.
as a creative person, you really wouldn't. But they're looking at it through the legal guidelines. It's funny too, because again, we work the same with whichever licensors we work with, right? We're the licensees, James. I always forget.
We're the licensees. Yes.
Yeah, we're the licensees. They're the licensors. And we've definitely done it from a more creative standpoint, working with artists, where we submit the pages to them. They come back and say, this needs to be redrawn this way, or this character doesn't quite look, what it is. So that process is the same. It's just a question of, if you're working directly with the creative people, as opposed to, having to go through legal and things like that for something like Smokey Bear, where, it's just going to take a little bit longer, to get approved. The other thing too, actually, though, and this was something that we kind of, again, and this happens in every industry. And it's something that I've realized, when James and I live and breathe comic books, we're talking comic books every day. We're making comic books every day. We're writing scripts every day. We're doing this stuff. These are people in a forest ranger office. They approved the script, but then came back and didn't like the artwork that came back on certain pages. Not to say they didn't like it, but they said, well, this wasn't approved. And then you're sitting there going, but no, we put it in the script. This is the scene that you approved it. And so at some point we had to take a step back and say, you know what, for lack of a better word, we have to get out of our own heads and realize and see it through their eyes. And I said, James, I know we don't typically go straight to letters, until the artwork is approved, because we don't want to have to change something later on. But we need to send this to them in finished comic book form, because I don't think they understand what they're reading, not because, they're not knowledgeable people, but it's the fact that if you were to hand somebody a comic book script, I've had this happen where people we'll be like, what's it like? How do you actually get the artist to do what you do? And this is not anything to do with licensing. This is just like everyday conversation. When my job comes up, you got to realize like, oh, they only understand what's on the finished page. Oh, there's too much space up here. Why is there all this space up here? It's like, well, that's where the letters are going to go. What are the letters? Like, what is that?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. People can only
we ended up with the just so you know, we ended up, I don't know, after 3 or 4 months of them looking at the artwork, sending it to them with just the line art, and we put the letters on the line art, and that sped things up a little bit.
It's better, yeah. So next time we're gonna have to break our own protocol, because we don't want to, you don't want to pay for revisions, and you don't want to, you don't want to keep bothering a letterer or bothering an artist with a million revisions. But it's actually better if we just send them the finished line art with the letters on it, because they can visualize and actually, oh, this is what it's going to look like, and that's just, we take for granted that, as creators, we take for granted that, and so it was a good experience for us. It's a good learning experience for us going forward. And again, going back to the idea of you're dealing with corporate people, you're dealing with non-creative people that just they don't understand your business. Just like I wouldn't know how to run a national park for service.
Right. Yeah. But and I also remember from like in my time in corporate, like even if people are, they have no idea how, this is when I was, doing video games, but like they have no idea on their end what suggestions or comments are like, well, that's a 5-minute fix, or that's a $50,000
right,
like multiple months comment to actually address. But they all are going to have comments, they're going to have feedback, and they're going to want to see that you take that on and address it in some way. So definitely something to keep in mind. So this is definitely pretty informative in terms of just like how you might find stuff like this, how you might go about a deal, like some things to keep in mind. Like what would you say the best thing about working on licensed properties like this, and maybe the downside that creators should be wary about? Maybe James and then Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's a lot of fun taking something that somebody else created and putting your own like spin on it almost. I think it's fun trying to figure out how to do that. As far as the downside is the back and forth with the people. You can ask Mike. I was getting like going insane with these people, going back and forth over and over again.
Yeah, more cooks in the kitchen.
Approved. Oh yeah, because it goes to the licensing agent, which then sends it to the National Forest Service, which then sends it to their lawyers, which then it's like
it's a long trail.
It's a very long trail on this one.
I think the best part about doing all this stuff, though, is when I get to tell people like, hey, I'm releasing a Smokey the Bear. I have to say it to them because they don't know Smokey Bear. I'm releasing a Smokey Bear comic book. And they're like, oh, cool. We know Smokey,
Yeah.
It's like, what are you working on? Well, I have the Sire. Oh, what's that? I've never heard of that. And it's like, so that's the cool part to it,
Well, let's address that real quick, Mike, because, in addition to this project, which is coming soon, you just launched a project earlier this morning. For the latest, the Sire, Sire universe. This is a project you've been working on for a while, but fill folks in if they haven't heard of the Sire, and what are you trying to do with this next launch?
Yeah, so it's the 15th chapter in the story. It's Sire Aftermath #2. I will not bore you with the details of the renumbering and the relaunching and all that fun stuff for Diamond and all that, all that craziness that went into it. But it's the 15th installment. It's a labor of love. I created the character in 6th grade. It's about a superhero forced by his own costume to fight evil. It's kind of like having a spider sense, but instead of warning him of danger, actually puts him in danger. Except by the time we get to this now, we've uncovered the reason. We've uncovered the origins of the costume. We've uncovered the reasoning, and this entire time he's thought that he is on the side of good. He stopped the bad guy in the first series, only to kind of discover now he actually might be the bad guy, and he might bring about Earth's destruction. So this is the aftermath of that discovery and the impact it's going to have on him. But first, he's got to get out of the situation he was in issue 1. And again, by the end of this series, we're gonna put the foot on the gas on this and really, you know, drive toward the main crux of what this book is all about.
Yeah. And so this just launched this morning. You know, one of the things that I wanted to talk to both of you about is just you know, the volume of Kickstarter projects. This launch, it looks like it's just a 10-day launch, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand with so many projects that you're working on, one of the ways that you can sort of launch more on Kickstarter and stay sane is to shorten the launch window. But how'd you go about sort of determining, you know, how many days to launch for this one and what is your approach?
James is our guru at Kickstarter. I mean, he's amazing at putting these together, knowing what works, doing the real back end production work on all this stuff in terms of getting it to a point where I just literally just copy his template at this point.
Yeah.
But collectively, we've kind of discussed it and said, you know, like we used to do the 30-day Kickstarter windows, right? Or the 21-day Kickstarter windows. And you've talked about it a number of times in ComixLaunch, and you know, we credit you a lot for getting us started in this Kickstarter business to begin with. There's so much downtime in between where you're constantly trying to create new buzz and create, you know, new effort for it. But we found just the numbers they come on day 1 and day 2, they come on day, you know, the second to last day and the last day. There's definitely movement in between. If you do launch something big in between to get people to come back to the page, it's great. But shortening the window, you know, James, you can stop me if I'm wrong or comment on. Doesn't feel like it really prohibits the overall end number, you know, too much to the point where it's like, well, we would have made 50,000 instead of 25,000. No, maybe we would have made, you know, 12,000 instead of 11,000, but we, you know, drove ourselves crazy for a week, you know, that we didn't have to do, you know. So that's kind of where we came from. James, I don't know if you want to, you know.
No, that's pretty much it. You know, I've been for mostly doing like, you know, like that 2-week window.
Yeah.
Smokey is going to be a 3-week one though, because we are trying to create buzz throughout as it goes and want people to discover it. So we are doing that 3-week, that 21-day window for Smokey, but
that's the max we're going to do.
Most
we're not doing any more than
we
that.
do this. Yeah, we do the shorter launches because we found that we're not making any more money by doing longer launches. So why?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is still it in some ways it's project dependent, and I think it also depends on like what your marketing sort of overall plan is. But especially for veteran creators that have a lot of and are working on a lot of projects, it's if you know that the bulk of your backing is going to come from your own internal audience, and you don't have like an elaborate sort of media blitz that such that you need the time to execute it all.
Right.
Shorter does make a lot of sense. But I agree with you for something like Smokey Bear that has the possibility of getting picked up by people, by you know, news coverage or you know, who knows how many forest ranger groups there are out there, or other you know, audiences that might potentially want to cover this thing. Giving yourself a little bit more time to get on their radars definitely seems like a good thing. I'm curious if there's any other way that you're changing the approach to a crowdfunding launch, given a character of this sort of.
James is actually doing podcasts now. He hates doing podcasts. Look at him. You got him on a podcast. No, we're trying to do as much press as we can. We release press releases. I mean, we've built up relationships now with some of the comic news sites as well too. And again, I mean, I think it kind of ties into the question from before. You know, we're not just creators anymore; we're publishers, and I think we have a publishing schedule, and we're trying to put out stuff. Pat Shand is another guy who has kind of transitioned from being a creator to being like a publisher, you know, where he's got the space between entertainment where that he publishes books, like he's releasing books. So we approach it from a different, we approach it from, this is step one of a publishing plan, whereas maybe a creator on Kickstarter might say, this is a dream project of mine, or this is if I can get 4 issues out, I'll be really happy of this one story. You know, so I think it's just we've evolved over time as well too.
Yeah. And I mean, this seems like while Kickstarter obviously is a big part of your business model, it's part of my business model, in terms of like mass reach for something like this, this seems like a book that you'd want in every library in the nation, and in the children's section of every small bookstore and things like that. I'm curious, like, have you, in this world where Diamond is who knows what and everything else,
we could do a whole show on Diamond if you want to have us back on for that.
Yeah.
It's been crazy with that.
But have you thought about what's the approach to get this beyond the Kickstarter? Maybe when you get that collected edition or whatever.
Yeah, we are actually in talks right now about that. So we'll definitely you'll see. Hopefully you will see an announcement. That's what we'll say.
Trying to get into the bookstores, but for Smokey, there is actually a catalog that goes out for all Smokey Bear products.
Really?
That we are going to be in for the first issue that we're going to, or the first edition that we're going to be in, is the winter for this year. But it goes out to all of like the national parks and all of wherever Smokey Bear merchandise would be sold, essentially.
Right, all the gift shops, I suppose.
All those little gift shops and everything. Yep. So we are going to be in that catalog, or this comic is going to be in that catalog come winter. And hopefully that works. We'll be in some national parks gift shops at the very least.
Well, I love that this opens up just some new approaches, new avenues, and gets the mind expanding a little bit and thinking beyond just the usual things that most creators are focused on, and to realize that the world of commerce and intellectual property is much bigger than even we appreciate. This is cool, guys. I appreciate you sharing the insight and the wisdom. I want to pick James's brain on one more topic, just because if you look at how you've been behaving as a publisher in terms of putting out a ton of content, any tips for creators that are trying to maybe put out significantly more projects each year? I mean, you're over 50 now. I know, like, you were on the podcast a while back talking about your 12 months in a row of like launching 12 projects within 12 months and everything. But what have you learned about increasing the volume of launches?
I'm still figuring it out, to be honest. It's just, it's just being able to create that content. Once, we started, making, a good deal of money on Kickstarter, we were able to do more than one project at once. So we just started expanding and then expanding, and now it's just like, we're working on, I don't know how many different projects right now at the same time.
Yeah.
It can be a headache at sometimes, but most of the time it is, very rewarding, especially when you get to that end part. So, if you want to, get more content out there, it's just a matter of putting in the time to get it.
James is very I mean, you're too humble, to be honest with you. He is a prolific writer and a prolific creator. I mean, we were going through our publishing list this year, and he's like, well, yeah, I have 6 issues of this book done. I have 2 issues of this other one done. This one just needs coloring. Like, he's got maybe
I've got 15, a lot in the bank right now.
I think a dozen to 15 comics you haven't even seen yet. Different titles. you know, just sitting on the sitting on our drive together, and you know, that's the first step. The first step is create this stuff. You have to create this stuff, because then you can start pumping it out. And then it gets it like James mentioned, we reinvest right back into the properties, right back into creating new properties. And as long as your brain doesn't explode, you know, it's a hamster wheel that just keeps turning.
And we have other, like, you know, people that we're working with too. Like, you know, we have Derek Friedels, who has done a couple of the Tales stories for us, as well as a new Dungeons and Dimwits that'll be coming out. He's done, you know, some stories for us. He's a guy that's like written for like DC and Image and stuff. So you know, we have like that as well. You know, we're working with other creators.
Yeah. Well, it's impressive what you've been able to do, man. And I appreciate you sharing some of these insights on a topic that we really haven't talked about. But I appreciate you, and I want to congratulate you for just thinking outside the box and bringing Smokey Bear back to comics. I guess it's been 50 years since there was a Smokey Bear comics.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about that. Yeah, the last comic that came out for Smokey Bear was in the 1970s. It was 50 years ago, over 50 years ago.
Well, all right.
It's the early 70s.
It's about time.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
it's not like there haven't been. It's not like there haven't been a need to stop forest fires in the past couple of years. So now this seems like the perfect time to bring Smokey back for a new generation. I wish you you guys the best with it. Mike Dolce's The Sire is live on Kickstarter right now, so definitely check out The Sire universe. Aftermath numbers 1 and 2 is on Kickstarter right now, and go sign up for Smokey's Junior Rangers, which is in pre-launch right now. So James, Mike, always a pleasure chatting with you guys, and best of luck with these new projects.
Thanks.
All
Have a good one, man.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you so much.
And for everyone out there tuning in, thank you so much for listening. We can't wait to see what you launch next. Take care, everybody.